welcome everybody, and in particular, welcome all the experts, colleagues, and people around the world that I see are joining us. The number is increasing every second, and all the participants and the panelists. Well, groundwater matters, and in particular, we would like to have groundwater in the next UN conference that will be organized in Abu Dhabi this year in December. The webinar series of 3 different webinars, he's looking at presenting and highlighting the importance of groundwater resources within the framework of the 6 interactive dialogues of the UN Water Conference. And I should definitely thank the panelists. You can see in these in the screen the panelists that will take the floor with us today. And definitely the first one of these 3 series of this series of webinars of 3 different on different topics. The first one will present why groundwater is important for people and planet. The second one will be related to groundwater matters for cooperations and multilateral process, and will be organized the 17th of June. And the webinar series is organized within the framework of the UN Water Expert Group on Groundwater, with the support, cooperation, and coordination of the UNESCO Intergovernmental Hydrological Program and the Rural Water Supply Network. Having said that, I would like really start the program, for which all the participants are connecting, and giving the floor to our panelists. And I would like to start with the chair, the president of the International Association of Hydrogeologists, Teodora Soxo. Teodora, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alice. Dear colleagues, partners, ladies and gentlemen, as president of the International Association of Hydrogeologists, IAEH, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the first series of 3 webinars organized by IAEH with UNESCO and the UN Water Expert Group on Groundwater. These webinars contribute to the UN Water 2026 conference by highlighting the critical role of groundwater in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The aim of this first webinar is to establish a clear understanding of the role of groundwater in daily life, its interactions with people and the planet. The International Association of Hydrogeologists, founded in 1956, is a global scientific, educational, and charitable organization with 5,000 members in 135 countries, dedicated to the understanding, protection, and sustainable management of groundwater resources, the invisible resource. 97% of fresh liquid water on Earth is groundwater, which is the sole source of over 1/3 of the population. It is essential for food security and green energy transition. Half of the rivers, lakes, streams rely on groundwater rainfall, along with important ecosystems. The International Association of Hydrogeologists promotes the visibility of groundwater in global water agenda and decision-making. So, IAEH is actively contributing to the UN 2026 Water Conference through developing a position paper, inputs to the high-level preparatory meetings in Dakar, Rome, and Dushanbe, and participating in the UN informal preparatory working groups across all 6 interactive dialogues. It is important to mention transboundary aquifers, which are essential to the objectives of many water agendas, while their management remains critical for achieving several SDG targets. With our partners, UNESCO and IGRAC, we have developed flagship initiatives like identifying 400 aquifers shared by 2 or more countries. This paves the way for water diplomacy, cooperations, promoting peace, and reducing human suffering. Addressing climate change is crucial. More than 2 million people live in near coastal zones, with 900 million living at lower elevation zones. They depend on fresh coastal groundwater for drinking, agriculture, and industry. The NASA satellite records indicate that the rate of annual sea level rise has more than doubled in recent years. In addition to climate change, growing population and freshwater demand combined with unregulated groundwater abstraction and the lack of holistic aquifer management results in the pure status of many aquifers. We must act now. Increasing the knowledge on groundwater and improving management and governance of groundwater is an objective of IAEA annual groundwater congresses. This year, the Congress will take place in Budapest, Hungary, from 14 to 18 September, with the theme Groundwater, a key multi-resource. A plenary session will take place, which will highlight the importance of keeping groundwater at the heart of the 2026 UN Water Conference. Expected outcomes include a revised position paper for the UN 2026 Water Conference, including the main outcomes of IAEA webinars, and the Congress-wide statement on groundwater to UN Water, the Budapest Statement on Groundwater. Ultimately, this session aims to send a strong message to policy and decision makers, ensuring that groundwater is fully considered in the water agenda beyond 2030. I wish you all great productive webinars today and in the coming months.
Thank you, Theodora. Thank you very much. Now we'd like also to continue with these first introductory notes and call Dr. Abu Amani, the Director of the Division of Water Science and the Secretary of the UNESCO Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, to talk with us and to give some introductory notes to this first webinar. Thank you, Abu.
Thank you, Alice. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues from wherever you are connected. On behalf of UNESCO, I'm very honored and pleased to welcome you to this first webinar of the Groundwater Matters series, dedicated today to the theme of groundwater for people and planet, which we are co-organizing with many partners, of course, and thanks to the International Association of Hydrogeologists, the UN Water Expert Group on Groundwater, and all other partners involved, of course, the World Bank, the Rural Water Supply Network. This webinar comes at a very, very important moment. As you know, already highlighted, we are in the process of preparing the UN 26 Water Conference. And we all know the critical importance of water, of groundwater, in achieving climate resilience, sustainable development. But despite the importance of groundwater, unfortunately, this is the missing link when it's come to better knowledge, knowing the water resources, and most importantly, its sustainable management. This is why it's critical so that we join our forces, our effort to raise the profile of groundwater moving towards the conference and beyond. From UNESCO side, as you know, UNESCO has been at the forefront of groundwater studies for many decades now, since the 70s and the inception of IHP. UNESCO has been working on groundwater with many studies conducted, but I will not highlight all of them here. But I want to stress on the importance of some of them. Of course, as you know, we have been working on the many hydrogeological studies, the managed aquifer recharge, the conductive water management, the ESARM, to name a few. But I want really to stress on one of the milestones which really gives the momentum to the raising the profile of groundwater. As you know, in 2022, which was dedicated as the water of day related to groundwater, we produce a tremendous report to make the invisible visible, and also combine to the Groundwater Summit, which was organized in Paris, which was almost the first, I can say, Groundwater Summit of UN Water, ready to create this profile. And this momentum was leveraged, and then we worked together to establish a dedicated expert group within the UN Water to continue working and also supporting government in better integrating groundwater within their policies. So now we are at a juncture where we should continue this momentum. And here in Dushanbe, as you know, there is this conference of the 4th Dushanbe conference, where all the interactive dialogue has been discussed. We'll continue doing those discussions. Of course, groundwater has been highlighted here, but we should do more moving forward. And UNESCO really is pleased to work closely with IAEA and all the other partners to continue raising the profile of groundwater ahead of this important conference and beyond. And we are committed and dedicated to work with all the partners in that regard. So I want to once again to thank all the partners, and we are looking forward to continue working with you to make once again the invisible more than ever visible. Thank you.
Thank you, Abu. Thank you very much. Okay, let me tell you a little bit how we will proceed. I will be the moderator of the first part of this webinar, and I have with me Cynthia McLean, who is a senior leader of Groundwater in Canada, and she will help to moderate the second part of this webinar. And our rapporteur is Augusto Abdon Kinglo, who is a member of the UNESCO Groundwater Youth Network, and is a research assistant at the French Research Institute for Development at the University of Montpellier. So I'm in a very good company today to follow up and develop the discussions. So our first speaker of this first part with us is François Bertone, that is definitely a very great friend of us, and as a groundwater expert and a senior specialist at the World Bank. Francois led the groundwater-related activities in analytics and lending operation, helping shape sustainable groundwater management solutions globally. He co-led the 2023 World Bank Economics of Groundwater report that was the first of its kind by these international institutions. Francois, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for being with us. World Bank, as Abu said, is one of the coordinator of the UN Water Expert Group on groundwater, and we are delighted to have the support of UN Water with us today. Francois, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alice. Thank you and welcome everyone. Well, I will certainly reiterate most of the message from that we had from Abu, that we are less than 1 year from the 2026 UN Water Conference, and as global community working on groundwater, it's very important for us to raise all these groundwater topic and to accelerate the visibility and the importance of the groundwater in the global water security commitments. I will start with some key figures that Alice just mentioned, that we produced the 2023 economics of groundwater report, but the figures in this report, they are still important. I will reiterate it because it's fundamental for us to, if we want to raise the groundwater topic, to have this figure in mind. First, groundwater supply 50% of the drinking water supply worldwide. 50%, meaning that even surface water is not 50%, because you still have the desal water and all the alternative sources. 50% is groundwater. 43% of the water for irrigation is groundwater. And finally, the groundwater, it provides food security for hundreds of millions of persons. And this is really important. It's key. We shall keep that in mind. Hundreds of millions of people rely on groundwater, and Theodora was mentioning it in the introduction. But if we look at the details, groundwater buffer 1/3 of the economic growth losses caused by drought. In agriculture, for instance, it absorbs up to half of the productivity losses from rainfall variability. That's important, meaning 1/3 of the economic losses, 50% of the agricultural losses that are caused by drought and rainfall variability can be oh, I forgot my word. Can be prevented thanks to groundwater. But it's not all. The lack of access of shallow groundwater increase the probability of stunting in children under 5 by up to 20%. So these are not water statistics, it's economic statistics. It's very clear that groundwater is not on the side and the economics and the development is on the other side. Not at all. Groundwater is central to the economic development. Let me start with some figures on boreholes. Boreholes, they are our main tool to tap the groundwater resource. But boreholes, they are also a signal, an economic signal by itself. We conducted recently an evaluation on borehole durability, a proxy of borehole performance, because borehole performance is still easy to measure at a single borehole, but difficult to look at all. So we looked at the durability, and we understand that this durability is not determined by the geology itself. It's not the primary determinant, and that's rather surprising. The primary determinant of the borehole durability is the construction. It's the company who built the infrastructure. It is the people, that is the human capital that these companies are deploying. These are the main driver. And then it has economic consequences. For instance, they are measurable. For instance, we identify that borehole performance or borehole durability correlates linearly with the agricultural value per worker. Very surprising. Well, not that surprising if we know the importance of groundwater in the irrigation, but there is a clear link between the performance of the borehole in a country and the agricultural value that every worker is producing. But it does not stop here. We also have a correlation between underperforming boreholes and vulnerable employment. It's higher when boreholes are underperforming. So meaning that more workers if in a country, borehole, in a specific country, boreholes are globally underperforming, we identify that more workers are trapped in informal, insecure, and low productive jobs with no safety net. That's very interesting, meaning that we have a clear link between borehole and the economics of what is water-dependent sector, like agriculture. But we also have a clear link between the borehole performance and the overall jobs in the country. And that should be, again, here we are just preparing the UN Water Conference, and this remark it should be for you clear signal that we need to continue working, and we need to continue working mainly on this economic thing and on linking our groundwater topic to its application on the ground. And we will be happy to see many of the academics that are probably in the room today working on this important topic. And maybe before I leave the floor to the panelists, some additional figures just for you to keep in mind the importance of our topic today. We say that 43% of the groundwater is used for irrigation, but let's make a step back. 25%, less than 25% of the cropland is irrigated. Nevertheless, this irrigated cropland produce over 50% of the food worldwide. Less than 25%, meaning that 75% of the land, of the cropland, is still not irrigated. And the solution for us globally to ensure food security will certainly be to transition from non-irrigated land to irrigated land. And if you are far from any infrastructure, public infrastructure for irrigation, your solution is groundwater. 250 million farmers relying on rain-fed irrigation are sitting over basement cropland, basement outcrop. And this is something that we are all overlooking for years. We are overlooking the groundwater in the basement outcrop, because we, as hydrogeologists, we know that it's a bit complex and it's about low productivity, but the potential is there. There is a potential for us to have 250 million farmers to transition from rain-fed to irrigated agriculture. I will have the opportunity to discuss that very soon with the president of the World Bank, Ajay Banga, with interest in development that we can propose in that direction. But just to tell you, this should be one of the major topics of the academic work. We cannot let all this agriculture, rain-fed agriculture, continue without helping them from our water source, from our preferred water source, which is groundwater. I see Alice, so I probably be much over the 5 minutes that I was given. So have a great conference, and happy to listen to panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francois. And yes, I mean, the interactive dialogue of investment for water, one of the coordinator for the concept paper, from the concept note, is the World Bank group. So we hope that the World Bank will bring groundwater at the UN conference. Let me go now to the another topic related to groundwater, and let me say that I mean, to secure food security, we need to invest on aquifer assessment and groundwater resources study and capacity at local level. Because if it's true that there is a lot still of land around the world that can be irrigated, if we don't know properly our aquifer system, as it's the case in many regions of the world, it will be a failure for the availability of the access of water in general, because we will waste the resource, and we will waste, of course, the opportunity to secure access to food and access to water. Having said that, yes, the other important topic is that groundwater is one of the main source of fresh water in rural areas. And I have the pleasure to have with me the director of the Rural Water Supply Network, Sean Furey. Sean has over 25 years of experience in water management and network management, and he focuses on uptake and scaling of research and innovation into practices and policy, and the professionalization of rural water services. Sean, thank you to be with us. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Fury. Thank you for the introduction, Alice. I'm calling in today from SCAT Foundation in St. Gallen in Switzerland. And I have 5 points for you today in terms of why groundwater is critical for rural water supply. So, point 1, groundwater is the safest and most widespread water resource for rural water supply, and it's particularly important where complex water treatment is difficult or expensive. And it's a buffer against climate variability and for climate change. This is one of the big findings that came out of some research that was done a few years ago about the role of aquifers in climate change. Point 2, a sustainable groundwater development is complex, but it's essential that there are skilled professional hydrogeologists, drillers, drilling contractors with the support and resources that they need to be able to do their jobs. This is a professional activity that needs to be done by professionals, and that means we need a pipeline of talent from graduates, from young trainees in vocational training centres, all the way through to retirement, and to make sure that there is some intergenerational exchange as well, to make sure that that wisdom is not lost and that it's built on. Point 3, solar water pumping is the future for many rural communities and households, but it needs good data, it needs good borehole yields, it needs high quality design and construction, there needs to be enforced standards and regulations, and there needs to be competent and equitable aquifer governance. Point 4, even with ambitious expansion of pipe systems, there will still be several hundred million people across sub-Saharan Africa that will depend on hand pumps for many years, even decades to come. So we can't neglect these people, and it's important that these, along with any groundwater system, they're built to last, and that preventable problems are eliminated. And for this, I would put a specific emphasis here on corrosion, because today, probably right now, there are people installing pumps that are going to rust within 6 months or so. It's so avoidable if good quality materials, quality control is done. So that's a solvable problem. And then finally, on a more positive note, I would say there's a real investment opportunity in rural solar electrification and water supply for domestic and productive uses. And just last month, We were at the Energy Access Investment Forum in Nairobi, talking to the rural energy sector to understand how they work. And I tell you what, they've got a lot more money and they've got a lot more literally energy. And I think it's a real, we have to, as a water sector, as a groundwater sector, we have to reframe, as Francois has alluded to, the economic value as well as the environmental value. But before we rush off and build solar pumping systems and lock ourselves into this kind of technology, there needs to be a conversation to avoid technology and policy lock-in that leads to aquifer degradation. So that's where the water supply people, the energy people, and the water resource people, we all need to talk together. So those are my 5 points. If you want to find more about the sustainable groundwater development theme that's part of the Rural Water Supply Network, here's the link, or you can contact me afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Thank you very much. I mean, it's very, very interesting to see that Francois from the World Bank and yourself are really highlighting the importance of the constructions of the boreholes, because and the energy that we will have to use to keep the pump working. And definitely these are some of the main issues that within the water economy have to be considered, as we hope very soon, very much soon. Having said that, I would like now to have with us Mónica Ximena Guzman Rojo for going much more on the details of real on-the-ground work that can be done in considering groundwater within the nexus, the water nexus, the wise nexus, in which we should include it. And Mónica Guzman Rojo is a Bolivian hydrogeologist and professor at University Católica Boliviana of São Paulo. She is particularly interested in translating groundwater science into decision-oriented indicators and public policy tools that support water security and climate resilience. She is a member of the International Association of Hydrogeologists Commission on Groundwater and Climate Change. And in 2025, she received the Marie Curie Prize from the National Academy of Science of Bolivia for her contribution to science with territorial impact. Considering the importance of groundwater and climate change, let us know a little bit your work about water under fire, how people are shaping Bolivia's public agenda on the fire groundwater nexus. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice, for such a nice presentations, and hello, everyone. And first, thank you very much to the organizers too for this space to talk about why groundwater matters. My name is Mónica Guzmán Rojo, and I am a hydrogeologist from Bolivia working at Universidad Católica Boliviana São Paulo. And over the last few years, I have been working to try to understand better how wildfires affect groundwater, especially in the Chiquitano dry forest of Bolivia. So what began as a very hydrogeological questions, what happens to recharge after a wildfire, gradually became broader questions that took me to community meetings, children's drawings, and to conversations with people who understand their water sources through daily experience. And I believe this changed the way I look at groundwater. And it reminded me that hydrogeology is not only about instrument models and data, it's also about listening, building trust, and learning how people deal with changes that impact their water security. And so today I want to share a few lessons from this journey. They come from Bolivia, but I believe they speak to many other places where fire, land use change, water insecurity, and of course, groundwater invisibility are becoming part of the same story. So when we often manage water through numbers, right? Liters, infrastructure, investment, budgets, but when water systems fail, the cost is transferred to people, and is transferred to their time and their daily opportunities too. In fact, the global numbers are really striking. Like you can see here, 250 million hours are spent every day collecting water. 10 million girls miss school, work, and social activities because of wash conditions. And 2.1 billion people still don't have safety managed drinking water. So water insecurity is not only a technical issue at all, it is also a deeply human one. And groundwater is so important in those situations because in many rural territories, groundwater is the water source that makes daily life possible through springs and shallow water wells. So when we say that groundwater matters for people and for the planet, we are not saying something abstract at all. We are talking about daily life. We are talking about dignity and security, of course. And that human cost becomes even more serious when the land itself loses its full capacity to store water. A recent report from the UN University used the term water bankruptcy. And for groundwater, I believe this is a really useful warning because aquifer reserves depend not only on how much water we use, but also depend on whether the land can still recharge them. For example, in the lowlands of Bolivia, wildfires are a major pressure on forests. And for many rural communities, groundwater sustains springs and water levels. So if they stop working, drilling deeper is not always an affordable option. And evidence from the Chiquitano dry forest suggests that severe post-fire conditions can reduce recharge in the first year after fire. And this effect may still be felt in the following years. So the situation is quite critical. And if monitoring an invisible resource is already difficult, as you know, how do we detect changes in groundwater over time? And how do we understand their causes early enough to act? In this particular case, this required both. I mean, hydrogeological measurements and local observations. Measuring water levels, visiting springs, and comparing that with what people were noticing in their territory. So in this process, monitoring was not longer only about collecting data. It actually became a shared way to understand the water systems. I mean, what was changing and where and why, of course. So people really helped to identify the places to observe and the questions to ask and all those signals that needed attention. And this matters because these kind of discussions around recharge areas and water sources opened a public conversation that eventually contribute to a municipal water law. So for me, I think this is the key point because monitoring can become a bridge between local observations, hydrogeological evidence, and public decisions, which is so crucial. And but visibility is never enough, right? Once groundwater becomes visible, I think science and institutions, and of course, public policy must be ready to protect it. And before finishing, I would like to say that this experience is not supposed to be a story about communities struggling alone for water, because people can help make groundwater visible, but they shouldn't be left alone to protect it. And when people give time, knowledge, and energy, science and institutions must respond. And this response would be with monitoring, clear rules about protection of recharge areas, restoration strategies, budgets, decisions in general. And those decisions need to be grounded in real territories. We need norms and policies that respond to real water systems, real communities, and real needs. In this case, a small community from Bolivia made groundwater visible, but protecting groundwater under fire needs a shared responsibility. So, of course, groundwater matters for people and for the planet when it is not protected by people alone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monica. Really great. Yeah, groundwater matters for people, for planet, and for human rights. This is crucial. We have to say that very loudly. Yeah. Now, going to another continent. I mean, we were in Latin America. Now we are going to Africa with a great expert and a good friend, Dr. Caliste Timunguya. Caliste spent the last 35 years working on groundwater issues in Uganda and Africa in general. He works for the Ministry of Water and Environment in Uganda as the Commissioner for Water Resources Planning and Regulation. He served as the Regional Vice President for the International Association of Hydrogeologists in charge of Sub-Saharan Africa. And since 2024, he has been leading the preparation of the strategic program on groundwater for water security and resilience in Africa, and its implementation plan on behalf of the African Minister Council on Water, the great report on the Africa Strategy Water to 2063. Caliste, the floor is yours, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alice, for having me. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. I will be taking you through how groundwater is actually contributing to realization of African Ministerial Council strategy for people and the planet. Again, as has been mentioned, Africa's agenda is driven by Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. So the continent has decided that we should link water to the overall continental agenda. So the continent has developed Africa Water Vision 2063, basically with 4 focus areas. The first one is to ensure that water enables economic growth and inclusive social transformation. Here we want water to be as an enabler for socio-economic transformation. We want also water to be a catalyst for regional cooperation and integration through having good water governance systems, institutions, and leadership, and cooperation based on a basin-wide approach. We want also water to be a tool for environmental sustainability and climate-resilient economies and communities, where we want water to be a climate connector. We're aware that climate change is manifested better and more through the water environment. The fourth aspect is innovation, capacity, and information. We want to build capacity, put in place innovations to move the water agenda forward, and also put in place information systems so that you can have informed decision making. So the Africa Water Vision 2063 and policy, which one can call AMCA's water strategy or Africa's water strategy, is aimed at assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems to achieve the goal of Agenda 2063. It is premised on 8 vision statements, and these 8 vision statements have been categorized into 4 pillars. Pillar 1 is on economy and society, which is basically focusing on water enabling economic growth and inclusive social transformation. It has 3 vision statements, one on universal access, safely managed water and sanitation services, sustainable water availability, and thriving blue economy. The second pillar is on diplomacy, peace, and security. Here we are looking at water catalyzing regional cooperation and integration, where we have water governance systems and water basins as recognized as shared assets. Then you have sustainability, the piece where we want water to be a tool for environmental sustainability and climate resilience, and here we have one vision as statements. Then the base pillar, innovation, capacity, and information, has 2 vision statements on human capacity development and investment in information systems. So the Africa Water Vision and Policy was presented last year to the ministers in charge of water. It was approved in September, and in February this year, it was approved by the heads of states at the Africa continent. But what is in there as far as groundwater is concerned? I must say groundwater has been fully integrated in Africa Water Vision and Policy. We have clear provisions for groundwater, one of them being ensuring sustainable development of groundwater resources. We're aware that demands for water are increasing. Access to safe water is still very low, and groundwater is being seen as one of the means through which we can bridge the gap. conjunctive management of surface and groundwater, where we want to ensure that we improve availability, but also build resilience based on conjunctive management of surface water and groundwater, but also prioritizing groundwater as a strategic climate resilience reserve. Again, it has been mentioned that groundwater resources are most climate resilient resource, and we feel that they can help the continent to move forward. So to operationalize the groundwater provisions in the policy, vision and policy, we developed a strategic program on groundwater for water security and resilience in Africa. This was also approved by the ministers in charge of water at the continent last year in September, and we are now moving it into implementation. This program is helping to move the groundwater provisions in the vision and policy into operationalization. How have we done it? We have positioned this strategy under four strategic objectives. The first one is strengthening policy, legal and institutional environment and practice for groundwater. We want to make sure that at the continent, the policy, legal and institutional environment for groundwater is there at continental level, at the regional level, national and subnational level. We also support multi-level human and institutional groundwater management capacity. We want to have capacity for groundwater development and management at continental, regional, national, and subnational level. And the third strategic objective is build a business case, demonstrate the economic value and cost-effective benefits of groundwater. We know groundwater has always been taken for granted. And strategic objective number 3, we want to demonstrate that groundwater is key, can contribute to socio-economic development, and there are many benefits. The fourth one is to develop and operationalize tools to raise awareness, support evidence. This is the traditional work we have been doing. So we have these 4 strategic objectives, and we are moving this program into implementation. We are currently having task team along each of the strategic objectives, and the task team is developing the implementation plan so that we can ensure that it is clear what we need to do now up to the year 2033. That's our first implementation plan period. We do believe that this program will create impact. We believe that by improving policies, strengthening institutions, building capacity, improving knowledge base, and of course promoting best practice, this program will unlock the potential of groundwater to contribute significantly to water security, build resilience to climate change, and drive sustainable development across the continent. So I want to call upon those who are able to come and join us to move this agenda forward, to come forward, and we move together to get groundwater high on the agenda and ensure that it can contribute to the development of the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kallis. Thank you very much. And definitely many not groundwater experts, I mean, all the groundwater experts, the one who really don't know that groundwater is contained in aquifers, and it's the aquifer system that we have to assess, to study, to monitor, and groundwater is not coming out from the tap like that. There is a system that we have to protect, to know, and capacity, of course, it's a crucial issue, as you said in your presentation, capacity for aquifer assessment in many areas and regions. So thank you very much. With this, I end my part of moderation of a moderator, and I will give the floor to Cinzia. Cinzia McLean is a senior leader raising the profile of groundwater in Canada and accelerating the UN SDGs progress through open data and collaborative monitoring programs across water and biodiversity. He is a director at the University of Alberta, groundwater advisor for Data Stream, and she leads the International Association of Hydrogeologists, Canada's Committee for Groundwater Advocacy. Cinzia, now the floor is yours, but I want to recall that we have interpretation from English to French and English to Spain. So I ask the panelists to talk a little bit slower to allow for good interpretation. Cinzia, the floor is yours, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Alice. For this next section of the webinar, we'll be hosting a panel featuring 3 experts who will share their insights on groundwater, climate change, and what these converging issues mean for water security and communities around the world. So first, I would like to introduce Juan Carlos Santamarta Cerezal, who is a full professor at the University of La Laguna and a member of the Water Committee for the World Federation of Engineering Organizations based in the Canary Islands, Spain. The title of his contribution today is The Role of Groundwater in Ensuring Water Security for Islands Under Climate Change. Thank you, Juan. The floor is yours. You can unmute, please. Thank you.
Just
Hello. Do you see? Can you hear me now?
yes.
Yes, we can.
And then do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Good afternoon from the Canary Islands. In these 7 minutes, I will focus on a simple idea. In islands, groundwater is not only a water source, it is often the safety reserve of the whole territory. And I will discuss why this reserve is so important, why it is fragile under climate change, and how digital tools can help us move from reacting to crisis to planning with better evidence. Let me start with the general water context of islands. Many islands have limited surface water, a small catchment, and short river systems. Because of this, groundwater becomes the main buffer during dry periods. But demand is growing, of course. Agriculture needs reliable irrigation, especially for high-value crops. For instance, our crops of bananas here in Canary Islands. Tourism adds strong seasonal pressure, often in coastal areas, and often during the driest months. Climate change makes the system less predictable. So the key message here is that water security in islands cannot depend on one solution. It needs groundwater protection, demand management, wastewater reuse, desalination of seawater, artificial research where possible, of course, monitoring networks, and planning based on climate information. Of course, the islands are different. The physical setting of the island is fundamental. Geology decides where water can be stored and how it moves. Volcanic islands may have lava flows and perched aquifers, so the system can store significant water, but it can also be highly compartmentalized. A low coral island or an atoll usually has a thin freshwater lens floating above seawater, with very limited storage. Relief also matters. High islands can create orographic rainfall when moist air rises over the mountains, in cloud-bed areas mainly. Fog and cloud water interception can be an additional hidden water input. Forests may capture this water and transfer part it to soils and research areas. The lesson is clear. The shape and geology of the island control the water system. So why groundwater matter in islands? Very good question. Because it is usually more stable than surface water. It can support drinking water, agriculture, ecosystems, springs, and wetlands. In dry years, groundwater often keeps the system alive, but this strength can become a weakness if we treat the aquifer as unlimited. On the other hand, groundwater responds slowly. Our decisions today might not be fully visible until years later, when wells become more saline, springs decline, or pumping costs increase. For islands managers, groundwater is therefore not just a resource to extract. It is a strategic reserve that must be protected before the crisis becomes obvious. So what are our groundwater challenges in islands? I think that the current problems are well known, but they often appear together. We see over abstraction, failing groundwater levels, saltwater intrusion, nitrite pollution from agriculture activity, of course, wastewater impact, and increasingly concern about emerging contaminants and microplastics. In many islands, monitoring is still incomplete. This creates a dangerous situation. Demands grow faster than knowledge. Tourism, agriculture, and urban growth may all need more water at the same time, while research becomes less reliable. Another weak point is governance. Groundwater management, land use planning, and climate adaptation are often treated as separate issues. In small islands, that separation is artificial. The aquifer, the coast, the farms, the hotels, and the energy system are connected, are fully connected. Yeah, the one thing that that is very, very important, the climate change. The climate change impact on groundwater in small islands is very, very important. Through several pathways. First, recharge may decrease because rainfall becomes lower or more irregular, and dry periods become longer. Second, higher temperature increase evapotranspiration, so less water is available for infiltration. Third, rainfall may become more intense. This does not automatically mean more recharge. Very intense rainfall can produce runoff, erosion, and flash floods, while reducing the proportion of water that infiltrates the aquifer. Fourth, sea level rise increase the risks of saltwater intrusion in coastal aquifers. And finally, lower recharge can concentrate pollutants. So climate change is not only a quantity problem. We thought that it's also a quality, timing, and reliable problem. And to finish, we have lessons learned and possible solution. First, groundwater must be managed as a strategic reserve, not as an emergency tap. Second, monitoring is essential. Water levels, salinity, temperature, pumping volumes, and water quality must be measured continuously. Third, abstraction control is not optional, where saltwater intrusion is a risk. Fourth, demand reduction is as important as a new supply. Agriculture and tourism can improve efficiency without losing productivity or quality of service. Fifth, the water mix must be diversified. Reuse, desalination of seawater, manage aquifer recharge, wetlands, and soil restoration can all help, but only if they are integrated. Isolated solution may solve one problem and create another. So this is for all for my part, and thank you again for inviting me and show this important matter that is groundwater in Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We agree that for island nations, groundwater is a strategic reserve that's so important to protect before there's crises that could be coming from saltwater intrusion or depletion or contaminants. And thank you for the recommendations around improved monitoring and governance to support development, tourism, and local people.
Thank you very much.
Our next panelist is Attila Kovacs, who is a senior researcher at the University of Miskolc, Hungary, and a member of the IAEA Commission on Groundwater and Climate Change. He will be speaking about groundwater systems and climate change, the goals and activities of the Commission on Groundwater and Climate Change of the IAEA. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Cynthia. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I am going to talk about the activities of the Commission on Groundwater and Climate Change. The Commission was initiated back in the early 2000s after the third IPCC report came out, when we realized the importance of climate change in groundwater assessment. And initially, it was a working group established in 2003 by Nico Goldscheider. And a few years later, it became a commission of the IAEA under the chairing of Nico. The new chair became Richard Taylor back in 2010. And since 2017, the chair of the commission is Tibor Stichter. its international and colorful team with young and not so young researchers. Our mission includes to promote research and development to advance the scientific knowledge about the climate change issue. As part of that, we have a website which is updated on a weekly basis. We are digesting all related publications and update a list, so it's really worth having a look. We aim at fostering interdisciplinary collaborations with research institutions and try to engage with collaboration with international organizations and agencies such as the UNESCO-IHP and so on. We have some ongoing collaborative researches. Also, our goal is to disseminate the research and development outcomes to the global research community. As part of that, we are currently editing a special issue of Frontiers in Water, also working on the Springer Encyclopedia on Hydrogeology, and also involved in editing several special issues on the topic. We also aim at creating awareness of the Commission amongst other IAEH members. As part of that, we are going to have a groundwater and climate change session at the upcoming IAEH Congress in Budapest, and also we'll be organizing a debate on the topic at the same event. We have set up a photo contest. If you have nice photos on climate change, you are absolutely welcome to submit. So that's our mission, and let's see what we are dealing with. Professor Santa Marta and Professor Rojo already mentioned some of these topics, but let me just reiterate. In relation to changes in precipitation patterns, we have several consequences to groundwater. First of all, the change in groundwater recharge. Based on the global climate projections, climate model projections, there will be some zones with intensification of precipitation, which will mean higher recharge and recharge pulses. In other areas, it will mean increased flooding. And of course, there will be some zones where there will be a substantial reduction in the rainfall. In general, what can be seen is that extreme weather events will make water more scarce, more unpredictable, and more polluted. That means more frequent droughts and more extreme floods. The first one calls for some storage solutions, and the latter one means also some increased contamination. At the same time, we see an increasing demand for groundwater resources. That means, of course, increasing pumping, which will put more stress on the groundwater resources as well. Our assessments are mostly based on global and regional climate model projections, which of course have some uncertainty, so we are updating our models regularly as the new projections come out. Another impact is sea level rise, and sea level rise, which will mean seawater intrusion and an inland shifting of the freshwater saltwater interface, which is mainly caused by groundwater obstructions, but of course we can expect increasing obstructions which will contribute to this process. Some other impacts include the melting glaciers, ice caps, and snowfields, which will reduce the base flow of the great river systems. As mentioned previously, droughts and wildfires can cause destruction of vegetation, soil erosion, and the modification of the groundwater recharge pattern. There are some solutions, such as managed aquifer recharge, conjunctive use of surface water and groundwater, wetland protection, climate-smart agricultural techniques, wastewater reuse, and so on. But in general, we need to be very proactive and creative to be able to deal with the upcoming issues, and that puts a lot of responsibility on water professionals and policymakers. And I think my time is up, so I'm just wrapping up here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
You'll need to turn on location services for that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kovac. This is really an excellent example of how the IAEA Commission supports international collaboration, including how both experienced and early career researchers can come together to improve knowledge dissemination on these important topics of climate change and impacts on groundwater, ranging from water scarcity to pollution to sea level rise. We really look forward to the continued contributions of that group to the international dialogue and the debate coming up in Budapest later this year. Our final panelist is Fiona Ward. She is a water, sanitation, and hygiene specialist focusing on water resources in UNICEF's Global WASH practice based in Nairobi. Fiona is a hydrogeologist and has worked for UNICEF for 15 years. Today, she will be speaking about groundwater and people, ensuring safe and sustainable water and sanitation services for all. Fiona, the floor is yours.
Great. Hi, everyone. As you've heard, my name is Fiona. I'm a water, sanitation and hygiene specialist with UNICEF, where I have a focus on water resources management. UNICEF is the global agency for WASH and humanitarian WASH services in humanitarian context. And for this, of course, there must be safe and sustainable water resources. For UNICEF, most of our projects that involve water would relate to groundwater. You've heard some of the various other panelists mention safe and sustainable water is intrinsically related to the development of children, not just in terms of quantity, but also quality, also about the time to collect water, because the burden of water collection falls mostly on women and children, and especially girls, but also that children have access to water at home, in their communities, and healthcare facilities, and also in schools. But also water is required for the collection, the safe collection, transportation and treatment of wastewater, as well as the practice of key hygiene behaviours like hand washing, which of course we all saw with a special focus on during COVID. I've seen some of the questions in the chat about wastewater reuse, and this is also an important area. Contaminated water impacts the health of children. When young children are subjected to repeated bouts of diarrhea when they are very young, this has irreversible detrimental impact on their mental and physical development, from which they can actually never recover. When there's low water levels in wells, often traditional wells can no longer be used, and as we mentioned, women and girls have to travel long distances at significant cost, and we heard that from Monica as well in terms of the gender-based aspects. But there's also, of course, an impact on the households and the costs for water, as well as the amount of time which they have to spend collecting water that could otherwise be used for more economical purposes, as well as increased medical costs, and all of this contributes to less household income, and this can often contribute to negative coping mechanisms like child marriage and child labour. So where are we in terms of access? The Joint Monitoring Programme, which is run by UNICEF and the World Health Organization, releases figures every 2 years. And Monica referred to the figures for safely managed, and this actually equates to about 74% of people having access to a safely managed drinking water service globally, but this actually is reduced to 32% in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of meeting the 3 criteria. And in most places, the actually weakest criteria is about water quality. And of course, safely managed doesn't actually take climate resilience into consideration now, but the JMP team are looking at this. But if it was included, of course, the figures would be a lot lower. UNICEF actually supported the governments of Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sierra Leone over the last 2 years to actually help include questions on climate resilient water services and the impact of climate on their services, but also water scarcity in what's called the national mix surveys. So this data is being generated now for the first time ever. Globally, of course, poor access to water is a strong risk indicator for cholera. Between 2015 and 2023, almost all, about 97% of cholera cases occurred in countries with less than 75% basic water access, as well as 60% basic sanitation. So their basic water had a much higher impact on the risks for cholera. And UNICEF, in a recent study actually called Water Under Fire, found that children in conflict areas are 20 times more likely to die from diarrheal diseases related to a lack of access to safe water and sanitation than from the direct violence. So where does groundwater fit into all of this? We've heard from various presenters about the importance of groundwater potential, both in development and humanitarian contexts, often in areas where we're working. Grants for humanitarian responses are often quite short, which also inhibits the response in terms of groundwater, but it is an increasing area of advocacy. Obviously, when we can transition to groundwater, there is an improved year-round access, there is improved quality, there is reduced waiting times, reduced walking times, and potentially also increased accessibility for those with additional needs. And we've also heard from Sean in terms of, as well as Francois, in terms of the construction, but poorly planned, designed, constructed and operated sources can also be a source of breaking of social contracts, as well as potential conflict within and between communities. We've also heard about the potential of solarization, which this is great. However, there's also many risks with this in terms of risks of over-abstraction. We've certainly seen this in Afghanistan and Yemen, that there's a perception that the water is then free and the restrictions that were there beforehand in terms of fuel limitations are now then removed. Maybe just 2 last points. On a positive note, increasingly groundwater and water for domestic use are being recognized in terms of climate finance and the potential and for adaptation. And a prerequisite for climate finance, of course, is the development of the climate rationale. This is basically the combined narrative which combines the risks between the climate hazards, the impacts on water and sanitation services, but also on the communities which depend upon these, and then linking also potential solutions, as we've heard some of them today. But this whole process brings about together the different sectors to recognize the importance of groundwater for domestic use. And also this whole process highlights the importance of groundwater monitoring, as well as early warning, early action, and also the importance of highlighting the value of water and the potential of wastewater reuse. This is also increasingly being reflected importantly in nationally determined contributions, NDCs, and national adaptation plans. And I see that Dr. Callist is here, and of course Uganda is the first country that has developed a water sanitation and hygiene national adaptation plan for the first time. But maybe my last point is to say that I was in Jordan for a couple of years and to highlight the importance of groundwater, that we did actually transition from transporting water 100 kilometers at huge expense because there was a sudden buildup over a couple of months of Syrian refugees at the conflicts between Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. And then we actually had many problems to provide water because truck drivers would go on strike, trucks got stuck in the sand, a huge logistical operation to ensure safe water and the quantities. But we actually drilled our own borehole, and because once we drilled our own borehole, we then had control of the water quality. We could increase the volume by 30%. We reduced the cost by 85%, but importantly, people had a safe and sustainable service of water, which operated for a number of years. That's it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Fiona. We recognize that many of your comments related so closely to the theme this year on water and gender, which is central in the preparatory for the UN Water Conference as well, recognizing that where water and groundwater flow, equality grows, and really appreciated the impactful statistics that you shared and discussions around accessibility. Thank you. This concludes the panel section, and we're moving to wrap up the webinar. I will now invite Ms. Jody Miller to speak about IAEA action and provide some closing remarks. Jody Miller is the section head of the Isotope Hydrology section in the Division of Physical and Chemical Sciences in the Department of Nuclear Sciences and Applications at the IAEA. This section is tasked with implementing all parts of IAEA's Water Resources Program. We'll hand it over to you now, Jody. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. I want to say, as part of my closing remarks, what a fabulous webinar it's been. Really, really interesting presentations, a lot of interesting facts and figures, things that are really sticking in my mind. But I'm also thinking, as I listen to all the presentations, that the webinar is focused on groundwater, and I'm sure that everybody here is a groundwater convert, that we collectively recognize the importance and significance and role that groundwater plays in providing water security, in providing wash services, in supporting food security, and in driving economic development. But I'm also conscious that groundwater is really just part of a larger hydrological cycle. And we really need to be cognizant of how it fits into this larger cycle. And that fit is sometimes difficult to convince people of, because groundwater, as has been pointed out, groundwater is largely invisible. We don't see it at the surface. We don't notice when its level drops like we do with a lake. We don't see when it's being actively recharged or flooded like we do with a river system. And we don't see when its water quality declines like we can see with a surface water system when there is algal blooms or there are fish die-offs, etc. We also don't see the impact of sea level rise with the impact of climate variability, even though, as many speakers have said, groundwater is really one of our frontline adaptation mechanisms or tools to adapt to climate change. So I want to say a little bit about where the International Atomic Energy Agency fits within this dialogue, because most people don't think of the International Atomic Energy Agency as one of the UN agencies that deals with water. But the IAEA is tasked with promoting the peaceful uses of nuclear sciences. And for those of you who don't work in nuclear sciences is just looking at things at an atomic scale. So we look at things in terms of atoms and isotopes instead of molecules and chemical compositions. So I have a few slides that I would like to share with you to talk a little bit about what the IAEA does and what it contributes to the dialogue that we've been hearing about now. So in terms of what the IAEA does, we really are looking at isotope hydrology. We are looking at using isotopes to fingerprint water molecules and components that are dissolved in or being transported by water. And we use two different isotopes. We use stable isotopes whose abundance is constant, but the distribution is changing. So we use that to look at quantifying interactions between different reservoirs. And we also use radioactive isotopes where their concentration is affected by radioactive decay. This is a natural process that is happening all around us constantly. And we can use that to look at the duration of processes, so timescales of water movement, for example. And the classic example is looking at groundwater dating. How long has groundwater been groundwater? At what point was it transferred from the atmosphere as precipitation into rivers and lakes, absorbed into the ground and transported down into the groundwater system? When did that recharge process take place? And that kind of information, that type of information, is really critical to making decisions about the sustainability of your groundwater supply. How long will it last for the purpose that you intend to use it for? And so we have worked with a wide range of other UN organizations. In fact, we are working with UNICEF right at the moment in Somalia, providing information on boreholes that are being used to support the population there, by providing information about the distribution of ages within the groundwater system, but also looking at water quality from a nuclear perspective. One of the reasons why the IAEA can do this is because the IAEA's strength lies in supporting analytical capacity. We all, I'm sure, have heard of the 5 accelerators of SDG 6. One of those is data and information, and we all recognize the importance of data and information. And it's not just generating new data and information, it's also using the data and information that we have more effectively. At the IAEA, we work on building analytical capacity. We work on building laboratories. And so we know that we can support a laboratory, we can help a country build a laboratory, but a laboratory has to be sustainable. It has to have a purpose. And so we know that to do this, we need to have projects that are collecting samples in the field that are being sent to the laboratory. We know that on the other side, we need to be QA/QCing the data to ensure that it is meeting the purpose that it was collected for. We know that we need to look at new and innovative ways of presenting the data in ways that non-specialists can understand and take on the messages that we are trying to convey. And we need those people, the people who are in decision-making power, to adopt these types of techniques and data products and feed it back into partnerships and collaborations that generate additional samples that go back into the laboratory and keep it running. And we feel at the IAEA that this is a very, very important part of being able to manage and use groundwater sustainably, because you have to know about your groundwater system. How old is the groundwater? How rapidly is it being recharged? What is the quality of the groundwater? Can you use it for the purpose that you need it for? These questions have to be answered by data, analytical data, as well as other types of data. And so we at the agency, the IAEA, are working with various other organizations to build this capacity. One of the ways that we are doing this is through the establishment of the Global Water Analysis Laboratory Network. This was launched at the UN 2023 water meeting. It currently has 51 laboratories in 45 countries that have joined. And I encourage anybody here who is listening, who is operating a laboratory that has isotope and analytical capacity, to consider joining the network and providing support to laboratories in countries that are not as well resourced, but also helping us with our goal of establishing a national, competent, capable water analysis laboratory in every country. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I want to say again how amazing. I thought all the presentations were really, from everything from the water statistics that Francois was telling us about, the implications of water security for Indigenous people that we were hearing about in South America, the role of fire in influencing groundwater recharge. I can speak from this personally. I come from Australia, which is a country that is well associated with bushfires. And there are many, many parts of what we've heard today. And I think it really does reflect that whilst groundwater is really important and we need to elevate its presence in the dialogue, it's part of a wider system, and it's an essential part of that system that we need to preserve and protect. And with that, I will, who is speaking next?
I will wrap this up. Thank you, Jody, for those comprehensive concluding remarks and description of the IAEA's role as well. We would like to thank all. Oh, are you going to wrap it up, Olivia?
Yeah, I was just gonna thank everyone who participated and all the panelists as well, and just let everyone know that our next webinar will be on the 17th of June. Groundwater matters for cooperation and in multilateral processes.
Yeah, we thank you everybody, Cinzia, for being on time. It's the first time that we are really closing a webinar on time. So thank you, everybody. And Cinzia, if you want to say a few words really to close, please take the floor.
Yeah, mostly that this was just the first of 3 Groundwater Matters webinars. And so Olivia shared the next one on Groundwater Matters for Cooperation and Multilateral Processes. There will be a 3rd webinar as well, all getting prepared for making sure that groundwater is visible at the UN Water Conference in December. So thank you all so much for your participation today, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thank you all. Thank you. And thank you, the participants. We try to answer to their questions on